Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the July 8th meeting of the Connector Board Authority to order. And with that, if I could ask for a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, June 10th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
There's a second, that's from Mark. Is there any further discussion, changes to the minutes? If not, Kathy will do a roll call. All right, Kathy.
Good morning, everybody. Gary.
Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning. Michael.
Yes.
Beirut.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Cassandra.
Yes.
I'm going to ask for Dimitri. Okay, I'll move on. Secretary.
Good morning and yes.
Nancy.
Good morning and yes.
Matt.
Yes, good morning.
Morning. Rena.
Yes.
And I'll ask for Zaranik. I haven't seen her either, so.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Minutes are approved. And with that, I will turn it over. Happy July, everyone. I hope everybody is well as we start a new fiscal year. And with that, I will turn it over to Louis for the Executive Director's report. Morning, Louis.
Good morning, all, and thank you, Secretary. Before we enter into today's agenda, I want to provide a brief update on our extended open enrollment and the work surrounding the American Rescue Plan. The open enrollment deadline remains July 23rd, so we have just 2 weeks left to go, and we are reminding Massachusetts residents who don't have coverage to sign up in what time we have left. We continue to see interest from people who are hearing about new subsidies through the American Rescue Plan, particularly those who are eligible for advanced premium tax credits to lower their health coverage premiums for the very first time. We are also continuing to try to get the word out to Massachusetts residents who have been on unemployment during 2021, and as a result of the American Rescue Plan can now qualify for a $0 premium plan for the balance of 2021. We expect to remain active in drumming up awareness and providing consumer assistance through the deadline, including with a day of coverage and Latino Festival in conjunction with El Mundo on Sunday, July 18th. And a few weeks ago, we had a great event at our Lawrence Navigator with Secretary Sutters and Congresswoman Lori Trahan. We'll be participating in another outreach event with Congressman Neal on Monday, July 19th in Springfield. The event in Lawrence was full of enthusiasm around the new benefits of the American Rescue Plan, and most compellingly, stories from our Navigator of savings members are seeing, like a family of 4 seeing their premium reduced from $266 to $135 per month, and a couple who paid $46 per month before and is now paying $6 per month. These new lower premiums are delivering real impactful savings to well north of 100,000 people in Massachusetts, and we are working to make these new opportunities available to everyone. Premium savings made possible by the ARP will extend into 2022, and today we will provide an update on our seal of approval process before September's final vote. To date, the process has been smooth with minimal changes anticipated in this next year's product shelf. In the second of 3 very significant agenda topics, I will present on management recommended authorizations for an overhaul of the Connectors Contact Center. And finally, today we will present to you our proposed administrative budget for fiscal year 2022 with a look back at the recently completed year ending in a favorable position. Thank you, as always, for your consistent support and guidance, and I look forward to our discussions today. Thank you.
All right, before we go into let me just pause and see if there's any comments, questions, as before we get into the meat of the agenda to Louis and his team? We good? All right. Next up is the plan year 2022 conditional seal of approval.
Good morning, everyone. Maria, perfect, have you go to that slide. Good morning, Secretary Sutters and members of the board. Today, staff will be presenting an overview of responses to the Health Connector's 2022 Seal of Approval RFR, which was issued back in March. We will recommend a vote from the board to issue a conditional seal of approval to the product portfolio under consideration. As a reminder, the conditional seal of approval is not an indication of expected approval, but rather a procedural step that allows staff to continue to further consider and analyze the product responses offered by carriers for sale through the Health Connector. Staff then returned to the board in September with recommendations regarding the final seal of approval, at which time we will have completed our review of products, have rate information, and a final proposal for connector care programmatic design. Next slide, please. Health Connector staff have organized their approach to the 2022 Seal of Approval RFR and review process to be oriented around the agency's strategic plan in order to ensure that our approach to product certification and offerings reflects our guiding principles and strategic objectives. Specifically, that includes initiatives related to helping our unsubsidized members who bear the full brunt of healthcare costs, strengthening the Connector Care program, improving member experience, maximizing our value to small businesses in the small group market, ensuring we're doing all we can to attract and cover the uninsured, and finally layering a health and racial equity framework into our seal of approval and carrier-related work. Unless any questions, I'll hand it over to Sam to review our QHP response.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. I'll begin with an overview of the proposed product shelf. The Health Connector received responses from 9 medical carriers for the 2022 Seal of Approval. These 9 carriers submitted a total of 52 non-group and 64 small group QHPs. As in previous years, the Health Connector continues to require for carriers to offer standard platinum, high gold, high silver, and bronze plans on both non-group and small group shelves. Carriers are also required to offer a low silver HSA compatible plan and a PPO offering on the small group shelf. We'll also continue to require carriers to submit a non-standard low gold plan that permits flexibility in cost sharing design within a prescribed actuarial value range. We have a few key points for the 2022 Seal of Approval on this slide. There are no new carrier entrants or departures for this plan year. We'll discuss Fallon's change in market and product strategy in subsequent slides. In short summary, Fallon will continue to offer all required products and continue participation in the Connector Care program on the same network and service area as they've done in previous plan years. And lastly, the proposed product shelf for this plan year will not be impacted by Tufts and Harvard-Pilgrim's merger. We anticipate preparing for these changes for the plan year 2023 Seal of Approval. And as we permitted in the previous 3 plan years, Connector Care carriers will continue to load their silver tier non-group plans with an additional percentage of premium to offset the loss of federal cost sharing reductions. The chart on slide 6 outlines the 52 non-group QHPs proposed for the Health Connector's consideration. There's a net decrease of 7 plans, and these are due to the plan closure from Fallon. And on the next chart, we have the 64 small group QHPs proposed, and there's a net decrease of 8 plans, also due to Fallon's plan closures. So all new plans and plan closures for 2022 reflect Fallon Health's change in market and product strategy. We provided a brief timeline below of events. In April 2021, Fallon announced it would shift its focus away from the commercial product offerings. And as part of this shift, Fallon is closing all plans on its 2 broadest networks, Select and Direct Care. Fallon plan offerings for this current plan, for plan year 2022, will be offered on the narrower network Community Care. In 2021, there's currently 1 plan offered on this network, which is Fallon's lowest cost silver plan, and serves as their connector care base plan. For 2022, Fallon will offer plans at each standard metallic tier on both non-group and small group shelves on this community care network. This change in product strategy impacts existing unsubsidized and APTC only membership and has no impact on the connector care program membership, as their previous plan offering will remain available. Of the 1,600 unsubsidized and APTC only members impacted by Fallon's plan closures, the majority of members will remain with Fallon and be auto-renewed into the community care plan at the same metallic tier as their previous plan. For those members that live outside of the Fallon service area, they'll be auto-renewed into the lowest cost plan at the same metallic tier offered from a different carrier. For this approach, we are working actively with Fallon to support all members in this change. And we're also working with Fallon to map catastrophic members who will have ample plan choice available to them as a result of the catastrophic plan closure. And I will pause there for any questions.
Nancy?
Yeah, thank you, Secretary. So will Fallon members who are in the broader network, whose providers are not in the smaller network, will there be other plans from other carriers that would allow them to continue if their priority is to keep their existing provider relationships?
Yes, we believe so. The carriers that will be offered as alternatives include Blue Cross and Harvard Pilgrim, some of the broader network carriers, and that's something we've flagged as a key point of communication.
Right. Okay.
To communicate with members.
Yeah, I think to the extent we can, tell people that if they're looking to retain their providers, that there are other options, and if we know what they are or likely to be, it'd be good just to communicate that so they can be sure to look at those. Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Before we move on.
All right, back to me. In an effort to deepen the Health Connector's understanding of ongoing carrier activities and to inform our future seal of approval efforts, staff sought qualitative information from carriers on two key topics. First, as part of our own equity agenda, we inquired about carriers' activities related to health and racial equity in order to obtain a stronger line of sight into how carriers are seeking to address issues of inequity in the health insurance market and healthcare generally. One common theme in the responses related to challenges regarding available race, ethnicity, and language data, and interest in working with the Health Connector on improved data collection from enrollees, a goal shared by Health Connector staff. Responses at a more general policy level were varied in detail and depth related to equity-related topics. After reviewing, we believe there is likely significant opportunity for deepening and improvement in this space, and an opportunity to create a set of equity-related objectives between the Health Connector and its carriers. We'll look forward to engaging in coming months with board members about an optimal strategy for exchange carrier coordination on racial and health equity goals. Second, as the Health Connector seeks to align with many of the components and service approaches highlighted in the EHS Behavioral Health Roadmap, we solicited information from carriers about their current coverage approach to specific services, such as certified peer support counselors and recovery coaches. This baseline information about current benefits and practices by carriers will be used to help craft the Health Connector's approach to next year's seal of approval as we seek to align with and amplify the Behavioral Health Roadmap. Unless there are any questions, I will hand it over to Maria.
Audrey, can I just make one comment? So first of all, this is obviously really critical and essential work, and particularly using EOHHS's behavioral health roadmap, I think just gives us a wonderful path forward on tangible things. On the health equity, if I could just put in a pitch, and I think it's implicit in what you said, but I just want to clarify, to try to identify areas that all of the plans can work on that are the same and collaboratively. So a history in health plans. They each do their own thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes good, but sometimes really minimizes the collective impact we could be having. So as we start discussing these health equity initiatives, if we could really try to keep that at the fore, I think it will increase the impact that we're able to have.
Absolutely. And that is implicit in what I think we were trying to articulate here, was seeing that variation between them, I think gave us the sense that there's really an opportunity to be more coordinated and aligned across all the plans that participate in the connector, which are of course the vast majority of plans in the state. So point very well taken, and we'd love to think more with you and the rest of the board about what that should look like.
Thanks, Nancy, for that. All right. Is that it?
Oh, I'm seeing Commissioner Vino. Looks like he might have his
I'm
hand.
sorry, Matt. My apologies.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And just want to congratulate the connector for putting together these two priorities. As I think many folks know, these two priorities, health equity and behavioral health, are also, along with affordability, fill out our three top priority areas. And we are thinking about this, each of these, in much the same way that the connector is. We're in touch with folks at EOHHS about the roadmap. They've presented to our commission. We are intending to do as you are here presenting, using our tools at the GIC to advance and implement the roadmap over the next several years. And in the health equity space, I think a lot of our early attention will be focused on collaborative work with our sister agencies to establish a standard framework for the data collection, so that we can really with more texture understand the existing disparities that already exist in the marketplace. So when I read this slide, it makes me happy that we're focused on a lot of the same things and implementing a lot of the same strategies. I think to Nancy Turnbull's comment, I think the degree to which we can all row in the same direction will produce better outcomes.
That's great. Much appreciated. And we'll reach out to ensure our efforts.
If I may, Audrey.
Sure.
So I just, I want to thank the GIC. I want to thank the connector, and I want to thank the Division of Insurance for truly all of us rowing in a very similar way around behavioral health and equity. I really just want to, this is not a endorsement of the roadmap per se, but the roadmap provides a framework that I think all of us, when we look at the lens and the access issues around behavioral health, to the extent that we can provide a common framework for families and individuals to understand in common language and not what sort of has created over time, I think we serve all residents of the Commonwealth much better. So I just really want to thank everybody for, it's hard work. It's easy to use the words, we're all going to collaborate, but I really just want to, and for connector board members who, really not part of that, that level of detail, if at some point would be helpful once we post our waiver documents, which is coming up very soon in the middle of July, which you will see embedded in a lot of the behavioral health roadmap, as well as the behavioral health roadmap, be happy to do at some future board meeting if you want. So my staff can do a short version rather than the 108-page decks we have probably on some of this. So I just want to really thank people for really continuing to push this. Sorry, Audrey.
Oh, no. Thank you. Unless there's any other questions or comments on this, I think I will hand it over to Maria to take it away from here.
Sure. Thanks, Audrey, and good morning, everyone. The 2022 seal of approval also includes an expansion of the Health Connector's insulin initiative, first introduced in 2021. As the board may remember, the Health Connector required coverage of insulin medications at Tier 1 cost sharing in standard plans in 2021. While this was a key change to promote affordability of insulin coverage, not all carriers covered Tier 1 insulin in both pen injector and vial delivery methods. As pen injectors are the more patient-friendly means of delivery, the 2022 seal of approval expands the requirement to include pen injector coverage at Tier 1 copays, and all carriers' SOA responses adhere to this requirement. In addition to this program, carriers will continue to be required to cover medication-assisted treatment at $0 cost sharing in the Connector Care program in 2022. Moving on to the Connector Care program.
Can I ask a question about that? Were the carriers fully on board with those essentially expansions of where we're going? Do you feel like we're pushing them kicking and screaming? Have you had a general reaction from the carriers on this?
Sure, thanks, Michael. Just to clarify, you mean in terms of moving to the pen injector requirement?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple of things. I would say there were only a handful of carriers who were not here already. Some of the ones who weren't do represent a sizable portion of our membership. So while it was a small number of carriers, we were sort of pushing in this direction. It was important to get them there for the proportion of members they serve. So I would say it was a collaborative process. It took it several months. You know, we first introduced the idea maybe back in the winter and then had several conversations with them. So I would say to their credit, you know, we did get them there, although it was a series of conversations. They did have some concerns over cost implications, but ultimately we were able to get them over the line, which was great.
I ask because, of course, diabetes is a really important clinical area, but it's certainly not the only really important clinical area. And I'm trying to get some sort of background sense about where the limits are. We obviously can't make everything that we think is important on Tier 1 for a bunch of actuarial value reasons, but it'd be nice to get some sense of how much flexibility we have. And I think maybe we'll have that continued discussion over the coming years. We're not going to make broader seal of approval changes now, I gather, which is fine.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And that's something our staff is already looking at for 2023. And with the help of you and your team, and we had some discussions about kind of where do we go from here. So we are still working through that. And I guess the last thing I'd say is that I think we've learned in sort of making these incremental steps year over year that we can get there, you know, once we have a plan. We just can't do it all at once, like you're suggesting. We sort of start and then build upon that and improve it over the course of multiple seal of approval cycles.
I have a question. This is Matt at the GIC, specific to the insulin pen injector Tier 1 coverage. So does the requirement allow a carrier to well, I guess my first question is, I presume that there are more than one manufacturer of insulin pen injectors that would allow carriers to place some of those injectors in Tier 1, but not all of their injectors in Tier 1. So my question, I guess, is do they have some flexibility there in coverage on the first tier?
Sure, thanks, Commissioner. They do. I'm happy to follow up with the specific language of the requirement, but what we've required is that carriers offer at least one of each type of insulin at Tier 1. So short acting, immediate acting, rapid acting, all of those categories. So there is a baseline that they have to meet, and then from there, they do have flexibility.
Excellent, thank you.
Sure, thank you. Okay, thank you. So moving on to the Connector Care program, while staff will provide a more detailed Connector Care analysis at the September meeting following premium rate review, carriers' seal of approval submissions allow us to review carrier participation, geographic coverage, and provider network changes for the upcoming year. We're pleased to see a stable Connector Care landscape for 2022 with no changes in participation or coverage. As Sam mentioned earlier, Fallon's changes in market strategy do not impact the Connector Care program. However, we do continue to see a few regions of the state with only one participating carrier, and our interest remains in bringing additional carriers with sufficient provider choice to those areas in future years. So if no questions on the Connector Care front, I'll move on to the dental side, and it's pretty short. There's no change to 2022 dental product offerings. We have the same carriers intending to submit the same suite of plans for 2022, with Altus and Delta serving both non-group and small group membership. So as our analysis of carriers' seal of approval materials continues, we will keep the board apprised of any developments throughout the summer before returning to the board in September for the final seal of approval recommendation following final review of all materials and premium rates. So thank you. That would bring us to the vote.
So let's just pause for any comments, questions, concerns before we go into the official vote.
Secretary, could I, this is just a request. And that is related to like now our subsequent review of premiums. We know it's been like a very aberrant period, the last 16 months or so in terms of costs and use. And if you look at the health plan financials, most of them have done exceptionally well in the last 16 months financially. So, I mean, I know we always take a very close and careful look at premiums and do our best on behalf of the people we serve, but I hope we will really have particularly sharp pencils this year, because I think it's going to be, a challenging year to figure the premiums out, but it's, I think, very incumbent on us to do that, given, I think, what the financial results for most of the plans have been. And I would say that includes the health plans and even more so probably the dental carriers, whose profitability has been quite extraordinary over the last year and a half.
Madam Chair, if I could just for a second, this is Gary. Yeah, I appreciate the comment, Nancy, and we will at the DOI certainly do that. As you know, it's every quarter quite a rigorous process, and this last quarter, which encompasses the first quarter of the next year. So we will certainly do that, and understand and appreciate too the comments that you made relative to utilization, carrier finances over the past year, and some of the just the way we've seen utilization trends throughout this year certainly has been a unique year, which will pose some unique challenges to the rate review process. But we're certainly mindful of that and appreciate your comment. Thanks.
Mary, the one thing I would just add to build on what Nancy said is sometimes when you come out of an extraordinary period, or aberrant, or whatever word we would like, does create that opportunity, right, for us to think a little differently on how we approach what I refer to as bridging out of the pandemic. So appreciate our colleagues at the Division of Insurance for seeing this as sort of a bridging out of the pandemic, and it may require, right, a different lens.
I could just add one comment. This is Matt at the GIC. It is, of course, an extraordinary year, and goes without saying. I know before COVID hit, just as I arrived in this position, we were seeing some troubling underlying healthcare trend across our carriers. And as we look forward to a post-COVID environment, we expect to see some of those troubling trends emerge. So while we have had at the GIC a year where we also were quite significantly favorable to our budget, as we look forward and as we have set rates for the year that we've just begun, it's our obligation to make sure that those premiums are set at a rate that anticipates that activity going forward, not looking backward. So I just wanted to note that as you know, we will continue to be in much the same boat as our colleagues at the DOI in trying to evaluate these unique dynamics.
Yeah, Madam Chair, sorry, this is Gary, sorry. Yeah, I think Matt makes a very good point, and we'll certainly be mindful of that as they project. And I don't know that you probably could not see me nodding to your comment, but I do think the pandemic has highlighted some of the thoughts that we've had over the last couple of years about the rate review process. I think it's given us an opportunity, as you said, to kind of look a little bit holistically at it. You know, we've been in this process for about 10 years. And so it's given us an opportunity to kind of look at what kind of things that we could do to, for lack of a better word, enhance, make some adjustments that may need to be made to the process. So thank you for the comment. You're right.
Any further discussion before the vote? All right, there's a motion before the board. Is there a motion? Or there's a vote before the board, is there a motion? Sorry.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? That's Nancy.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, Kathy, for the roll call.
Okay, Gary,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Fay Ruth,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Cassandra,
Yes.
Secretary,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Rena.
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion carries. Thank you. So I think we're now going to go into the contracts, contact center contracts. And is this Lewis? You can walk us through this, Vicki and folks?
I should get off mute.
That would be helpful.
But yes, and because of the significance of the item, I'm personally presenting on new contracts for contact center services, implementation and operations. So next slide, Audrey. In the course of this management recommendation, I will touch on background information, contracts overviews, budget, terms and conditions, and milestones preceding a request to vote. Next slide. The Health Connector management is engaged in a top to bottom revisitation of the customer service experience in our contact center and back office. The platforms, the staffing, the management disciplines, and the approach. As described in our June board meeting, Health Connector management recommended and the board authorized early work with Accenture State Healthcare Services to undertake early planning and design related to this revamp. As it has been since the relaunch of the connector in 2015, our objective has been to excel at the member experience and not stop until we meet that objective. At this time, management is requesting authorization to proceed with the implementation of a major revamp of our contact center front office, back office, in-person centers, and our customer relationship management platform in order to remediate certain ongoing challenges in member access to services. In response to an emergency procurement effort, Accenture State Healthcare Services has responded with a comprehensive proposal with transfer of services targeted for this October 2021. Next slide. We do have experience with Accenture. They've responded very effectively to recent challenges in support of the Massachusetts Health Connector, providing contact center management supports starting last fall and surge staffing for 2021 open enrollment. I think it's significant to observe that their customer satisfaction ratings for the agents that came on for surge staffing were extraordinarily high. Their work demonstrated depth of strength in both management skill sets and tools. This is a new effort. They'll have to prove themselves once again, but the experience we've had has been strongly positive to date. Next slide. With regard to the overall scope and services at Go Live, it includes assisting members and assisters in answering their questions regarding eligibility, plan selection, enrollment, billing, payment, reported change, and general program inquiries. All calls in both English and Spanish, and providing translator services for multiple other languages, processing documents regarding identity proofing and program eligibility, outreach and coordination with third-party vendors to meet turnaround times required for timely access to coverage, support for members who have medical needs or other issues requiring coordination with our Health Connector Ombudsman team, quality assurance and customer satisfaction programs, and a workforce management program to fully forecast and manage call and case activity. In addition, as part of the revamp, the Health Connector will be taking over itself assignment of the 2 leases on customer interaction centers, our in-person walk-in centers in Boston and Worcester, to give us the most flexibility in how those walk-in centers will be managed. Next slide. So this is a complex set of transactions. From Accenture, we will acquire implementation and staffing services, management services, but there are also technology supports that are necessary to support the revamp. I think it's significant to note, and I noted this in June, that this effort will, for the very first time for the connector, result in a customer relationship management platform that the connector has residual post-contract license rights to. And putting that in plainer English, once this set of proposed contracts is complete, connector will have at its option the ability to keep its customer relationship management system, potentially shielding member disruption and associated costs and complexities of data migration when determining scope in future procurements. In order to procure these additional cloud services and software licenses, the Health Connector will work through vendors currently on pre-bid state blanket contracts. Specifically, the Health Connector would contract through Smartronics, leveraging an EOTS, that's our Executive Office of Technology, Systems and Services, I think, though I'm always forgetting the full acronym, but it might be Security and Services, but they're our principal technology agency in the Commonwealth. Their master blanket PO 7798, and these would be for licenses to Amazon Web Services. And also to Carasoft, leveraging state blanket contract ITS 60 for a broad range of software licenses with names that really help you understand that these must be generated by random name generators. So with that having been said, next slide, please. Our plan for October is to release all of the fundamental capacities to manage our call center through open enrollment 2022. There are very tight timeframes to make this October date. But we are planning for what we're calling a day 2 release. That would be later in the winter or spring with more advanced capabilities. This would include advanced speech analytics that helps understand customer interactions better in an automated way, better interactive voice response self-service, improved call routing to agents that are specially trained in complex issues, and additional member communication and support channels, including email, chat, and text. Next slide, please. With regard to the budget overall, the recommended contracts reflect $10.4 million in implementation costs, of which the $3.4 million in planning and design that the board approved in June, that is already embedded in the 10.4, so it's net additional of 7 million. Exclusive of implementation, ongoing operations over the approximately 4-year term is estimated to be approximately 117 million, inclusive of the cloud services, software licenses, and CIC lease costs. Smartronics and Carahsoft are reflected in the table below as third-party technology, and for fiscal 22 are estimated at 0.8 million and $1.6 million respectively for fiscal 22. Therefore, the aggregate value of contracts and leases recommended is approximately 127 million when including the implementation expenses. Next slide, please. With regard to timeline and terms, as I mentioned, the planned go-live date is October 1st, which is 2.5 short months away. There are 4 milestone payments associated with release 1 on October 1st. These are itemized in the table embedded. And the contract has a set of service level agreements covering incident management, call center performance, case management performance, escalations, CSAT scores, and overall staffing levels. The contract, and particularly the Accenture contract term, extends through August 8th, 2025 with no options for renewals or extension. In respect of the fact that this is an emergency procurement and we really need to undertake a full competitive procurement. Owing to the runway that these procurements require, that would probably need to start in 2023 in order to establish substitute services by October of 2025. And that leads us really to the management requested board votes on the next slide, Audrey, but I will pause here except to note that there are 4 separate board votes. And I'll just briefly go through the content of the votes. The first vote is for Accenture and the services it provides, including pass-through expenses. For total implementation costs of 10.2 million. The reason that differs from the 10.4 million earlier cited is that 200,000 is owing to third-party software licenses, and approximately $95 million for operational services through August 8, 2025. The Smartronics vote would allow the Health Connector to engage Smartronics to provide the Amazon Web Services for an estimated annual cost of $831,430. The third vote is for the Carasoft software license contracts, which would allow us to procure the various curiously named software elements for an estimated annual cost of $1.6 million. And the final vote is with regard to the CIC leases currently held by the incumbent vendor. And Health Connector staff are recommending that the board allow the Health Connector to execute an assignment of those leases for our Boston and Worcester facilities to the connector directly. And they have an estimated annual cost of $208,000 and $67,000 respective. Because of our bylaws, the votes correspond to contracts as opposed to overall projects per se. And that's the reason these are broken out in this manner. But we're asking and recommending from a management perspective the authorization to proceed with these contracts. And with that, I'll stop for any questions.
Right. So there's a lot to digest. Let me just pause to see if there's any questions before we take these. We'll take them, you know, one at a time in compliance, in conformance with our bylaws. Thank you, Lois. Is there any? Apparently I don't do a good job seeing if people raise their hands or anything. So anybody? All right. So we have 4 specific votes. So we're gonna, the first one, there's a motion. If I could, for vote number, I'm just gonna call it vote number 1. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Kathy, you want to do the roll call?
I will. Gary,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Cassandra,
Yes.
Secretary,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Rena.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Vote carries. Vote 2, is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, Kathy?
Gary,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Cassandra,
Yes.
Secretary,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Rena.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. I'm starting to think maybe we should take a look at our bylaws that we vote on projects in addition and or contracts, but given how our bylaws are currently constructed, vote number 3, is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, Kathy?
Gary,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Cassandra,
Yes.
Secretary,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Rena.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Vote 4. Is there a motion, please?
So moved. Now you're just waiting on me.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, Kathy?
Gary,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Ruth, Ruth,
Yes. Sorry.
that's good. Mark,
Yes.
Cassandra,
Yes.
Secretary,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Rena.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All 4 votes carry. There's a lot of work, as I think Louis mentioned, 2 short months. Want to thank Louis and the staff for all the hard work to get us to this point with a very clear focus on the customer experience.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Louis. All right. Out of votes. All right, I think we're moving to, I see Kari, I think we're going to do the administrative finance update. Unmute, Kari.
Apologies. As I did that, my other screen showed up regardless. Good morning, Madam Secretary and members of the Health Connector Board. I'm assuming you can see my screen. The purpose of the presentation this morning is to review our fiscal year 21 administrative budget, our year-end projection, and then review the FY22 budget recommendation prior to requesting a board vote. So with respect to FY21, it's favorable to budget, as Louis mentioned, by nearly $5 million. About $4 million of this is attributable to timing and the deferral of some strategic plan initiatives and other projects that we have put on hold at this point due to competing priorities. The remainder, about $1 million, is due to lower than budgeted expenses, primarily for contact center and premium billing vendors, as well as personnel. With respect to FY22, based on the votes that were just approved, the recommendation reflects significant usage of reserves due to the implementation of new contact center services. It also reflects a $10 million reduction in administrative support via the Commonwealth Care Trust Fund, or CCTF. The FY22 recommendation reflects a projected net loss of $14.7 million and corresponding reserves of $29.3 million. Slide 3, you've seen this before. This shows the Health Connector's administrative costs on a per member per month basis. This is the first time we've shared this with you as far as we've adjusted it to reflect inflation. So you can see for FY21 and 22, it's about $23 and $26 respectively. If you back out the one-time implementation costs, our PMPM is projected to be about $24 in FY22. This does reflect a return to FY18 levels. And going forward, we do anticipate further reductions based on assumptions about the cost structures of our vendors and projected increases in membership as the public health emergency ends. And if there are no questions, I will continue to FY21.
So can I ask a quick question here? So what does the line on the graph illustrate? So,
oh, apologies, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The line on the graph is a representative of our membership.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions? Okay. So this slide shows you here fiscal year 21 enrollment. Excuse me. Current enrollment projections reflect a year-end membership of approximately 307,000 overall. And of that, there's about 192,000 for the Connector Care program. These estimates are similar to what was presented to the subcommittee in June, but compared to the board-approved estimates from last year, they do reflect a 6% decrease. The key driver of this decrease is that member flow from Mass Health is on pause as a result of the ongoing federal public health emergency. We will continue to monitor timing and dynamics of returning QHP eligible members once the federal emergency period ultimately ends, which we're currently assuming in January of 2022. And if there are no questions on enrollment, I will turn to FY21.
I just, so technically at this time, it's scheduled to end at the end of December. So redeterminations of the Mass Health membership would commence in January.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Secretary. And with respect to FY21, you've seen this slide before. It summarizes our current budget relative to the board approved budget. And we also, for your convenience, we do provide the estimates that were shared in January with the A&F subcommittee. Our current projection is favorable to the board approved budget by $4.9 million And I had mentioned earlier that of this 4.9, 4.1 is due to just deferring some of our strategic plan and investments and other projects. Some of those will occur in 22, and some of those will continue to be on hold until further discussions. The remaining 1 million or so is primarily due to a net reduction in expenses across our line items, but you'll see the biggest decreases in contact center and premium billing, as well as our personnel line, and that's because of updated staffing assumptions and delays in hiring open positions. So this results in a $7.6 million projected net gain in FY21, with reserves of around close to $44 million. This is, our auditors will be happy. This reflects about 6 months of operating expenses per their recommendations. So FY21 is looking somewhat favorable. I'll pause here before I hand it over to Newper to discuss FY22. Are there any questions?
Any questions? No? All right. We can proceed.
Thank you, Carrie, and good morning, everyone.
Newper, we can't hear.
My apologies, Lewis. Is that better?
Yes.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone.
Newper, for some reason, you've got to be so close to the mic. Yeah.
My apologies. So current FY22 projections reflect implementation of new contact center services, as well as the impact of the American Rescue Plan and the assumed end of the public health emergency, as the Secretary said in December, with the restart of normal operations in January 2022. Contact Center informs the projected increase to FY22 expenses, resulting in a $14.7 million projected net loss. For future years, we expect the impact of contact center changes on the net position to be much more moderate, as implementation activities will be completed. Both ARP and the public health emergency ending are expected to favorably impact enrollment, informing the 4% increase relative to FY21. That will be shown on the next slide. Are there any questions? All right. Current FY22 enrollment projections reflect a year-end membership of approximately 371,000 overall and 229,000 for the Connector Care program. This represents a 4% increase relative to FY21 and is driven largely by growth in the APTC-only program because of the American Rescue Plan. Furthermore, FY22 year-end projected enrollment for Connector Care is not only restored to pre-pandemic levels, but exceeds FY20 ending enrollment due to the current assumption about the end of the federal public health emergency and the resuming of enrollment movement between programs. Are there any questions on FY22 enrollment? So slide 10 provides a view of the current FY22 budget, reflective of the considerations detailed earlier on slide 8. Relative to FY21, the current FY22 estimate is unfavorable by $22.3 million, primarily due to contact center. Additional drivers include a reduction to the CCTF request of $10 million, partially offset by increased revenue as a result of the enrollment increase. Additionally, the recommended amount for personnel is equivalent to the FY21 original budget, and the increase in IT facility and administrative costs is due to banking and lockbox fees. Given the projected net loss of $14.7 million, FY22 year-end reserves based on these assumptions are approximately $29.3 million. Are there any questions on FY22?
So does the administrative budget include the pickup of the leases that we just voted on, or does that show someplace else?
No, that includes the pickup of the leases.
I should have known the answer to that question.
No, it's not self-evident, but but it includes all of the votes earlier voted on.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead. Actually, can you just go back to that page again, please? All right. If there's no further questions, I think the next slide we have a vote. All right. So is there a motion to adopt the administrative budget recommendations?
Moved.
Thank you, Cassandra. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Competing seconds. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All right, Kathy, call the roll.
Okay, Gary,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Fay Ruth,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Cassandra.
Yes.
Secretary,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Rena.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Right. Motion carries. All right. I think that actually concludes the formal business before the board, but I wanted to just pause. And there was a lot of votes in there and a lot of, and I think to use Nancy's word, it really has been sort of an aberrant. I'm going to hold on to that word. I think I've been using interesting, unprecedented, an aberrant year. And as
I'm sure there are many other words that you prefer to use, Secretary.
Some of which we can't say in public. But I just want to pause. One is to thank the board and certainly the staff of the connector for managing through, what has just been an unprecedented time for the Commonwealth and the country. So one, I just want to thank all of you for your public service and your commitment to the health of all residents of the Commonwealth and all that you do, both in your non-connector roles and obviously in support of the connector's mission. So I just want to say that. Secondly, I just want to pause. I think we will probably not have an August board meeting. So
That's correct.
So as we then think through this year, Nancy at the last meeting had sort of just put out there some things that we should probably be thinking about to talk about, in addition to our fiduciary and governance responsibilities of the connector board, but some of the policy issues. So I just wanted to pause, as we do have a few minutes, and just sort of collect thoughts for the staff to work on for us for probably September. So let me just pause on that. Anybody? Rena?
Yeah, I have this is not necessarily under the purview of the connector board, but I feel the need at every meeting to continue to push on the affordability issue and the merge market commission that was charged with understanding how to make healthcare more affordable so that health insurance is more affordable. And I continue to worry based on the conversation that happened about an hour ago about trends that were emerging prior to the pandemic. And we know they're going to come roaring back after this pandemic. And I just think anything that the connector can do to continue to push as many stakeholders to come together to solve this problem, the better.
Thumbs up from Mark.
Yes, I feel the exact same way. A focus on how to capitalize on the whole era of transparency to help really enable consumers to be smart shoppers of their healthcare, and for us to help navigate them through that complex process. So I feel the exact same way Rena does.
Others? Anyone else?
One trend, Secretary, that I think, and you already talked about it, was the whole notion of mental health. And in our client base, we work with a lot of schools, private schools. And one of the most shocking things I've seen and really speaks to our focus and efforts here is the whole notion of even children. You know, we've seen a huge spike in claims for the people aged 10 to 19 years old. I mean, that's really sad. And I'm really, just wanted to back up what you said earlier. The more we can do to connect the community with behavioral health, I think it's incumbent upon all of us, that and primary care. Also, as I go around and talk to millennials aged 39 years of age or younger, they don't even have a primary care physician relationship, most of them. And if they do, they think it's the urgent care facility. That's an epidemic that will manifest itself 10 years from now if we don't connect them with primary care. So just wanted to add in that commentary in support of what you were saying.
And in response to Mark's comment on mental health, and I agree completely, we might think about, and I realize this is down the road, how to be sure that the carriers are offering access to some of the new telemental health options, which I think provide a level of access that transcends what we might be able to get through our super important but somewhat stretched traditional mental health system.
Yeah, Michael, there are a number of platform providers out there. I think that's a really good idea. As an example, we work with one called Amwell, and they have a network of behavioral health, mental health providers, and what we've seen is an increased utilization and really outreach as a result of telehealth. Because people, they can't find a behavioral health specialist because they a lot of times don't contract with the networks because they don't want to. And then secondarily, people are reluctant to go because of who they might run into in the parking lot or the waiting room. This is pre-COVID, of course, even more amplified by the time we're living in. But telehealth, you're right, is a great way for people to get that help and that access in the comfort of their own home.
Yeah, we just haven't thought through how that fits into all of our benefit designs and stuff, which is, I looked into this before when I was chair of the Harvard Benefits Committee. It's not a trivial set of considerations, but we should leave that since Secretary Sutter's asked a very broad question. She got a very broad answer.
That's fine.
I will say, if I may, just briefly on that same comment about behavioral health and telehealth, that is an area where we at the GIC have actually taken specific steps around plan design for our current fiscal year, which started last week. We have waived copays for in-network behavioral health telehealth visits. So we have seen, as I'm sure others have seen, that the use of telehealth for behavioral health has persisted, not as much as more than it has even in just broadly in primary care. But I think that's a modest step that we've taken, and I expect we'll be doing more and looking more into that. We want to see that trend continue.
Nancy, before I turn it over to you, if I could just segue. So the 16 months ago, or whenever the March was, a year ago, in the governor's state of emergency did require, we implemented telehealth rapidly, including telebehavioral health in a broad definition of telebehavioral health, and the requirement that it be paid at parity, that people, the expectation that in-person and telehealth was same quality, which is one of the reasons why we did that. The law that passed by the legislature in December requires telebehavioral health, telehealth, and telebehavioral health in particular is called out for all commercial plans in Massachusetts. We're actually finalizing right now on the Medicaid side, the Mass Health side of the shop, our guidance on telehealth and particularly telebehavioral health will be coming out by probably the end of July. And we will again adopt a broad definition of what are the various mechanisms that can be used. Not everyone has the ability to use, Zoom or whatever, and so we want to ensure an equity, a very strong equity lens in this, and consent of the client. That needs to be a mutual consent. So So I think it's here to stay, but didn't mean to, Nancy, I just didn't mean to, I just wanted to jump in on that.
None of that. No, that's fine. Maybe I could add one thought. One was, Secretary Sutters, you offered us a less than day-long briefing on the waiver proposal, but I think I imagine most of the other members of the board, I would find that very helpful. As a part that's related to that, at least for a couple of years, the ARP is bringing a lot of additional funding into the state, and if that funding were to become permanent, that will produce some permanent long-term savings, including the CCTF trust fund, and maybe create some additional opportunities for the state on the coverage and other fronts. So I think putting that on the agenda and thinking about what would we do if that were to happen, and I would advocate how can we try to advocate for it to become permanent. So
Permanent.
Yeah.
Point. Thanks. I'm happy to set up, I'll work it through the connector staff. We can do a briefing for anyone who wants on the waiver. Happy to do that. We'll be doing the public posting and stakeholders, but happy to do one for the connectors.
Thanks.
Connector board. All right. Anyone else? Any further business before the board today?
Thanks.
Ruth, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. This really just segues on what other people were saying in the previous presentation. I think oftentimes we think about the last year and a half about what COVID has taken from us. And I also think that there is maybe this is just my sort of optimistic framework, but really also what it's given us and sort of the clarity around how we understand the disproportionate impact and really appreciate the equity lens that the connector staff has applied to all of the work. And I think sort of moving that forward, sort of how we ensure that we're embedding that in everything that we're talking about, and how we go through as we're thinking about some of the things that happened during the pandemic that increased access, that increased ability for sort of cost, and sort of how do we advocate to sort of make those, it just really segues off of what Nancy and Secretary Sutters was saying, but how do we become advocates for some of those really best practices? And I know, that the legislature and the governor has sort of recommended things to become permanent, but I think that there's another layer of that. And so just wanted to echo that and add my voice to it.
Thank you. All right. If there is no further business before the board, I would ask for a motion to dismiss, to adjourn, dismiss. Come back to teaching.
So move to dismiss and adjourn.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
I was gonna say, really? All right. Thank you, everyone. Oh, Kathy, your roll call.
Okay. Gary.
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Ruth.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Cassandra.
Yes.
Secretary.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Rena.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. All right.